Hello and welcome to the Seahawkers podcast. I'm Brandon Schultz, and I am joined by my good buddy Adam Emmert as we are going through Adam's list of his top quarterbacks in the NFL draft, 2024 NFL draft. Every year we like to go through, we like to talk quarterbacks, even if the Seahawks don't need one. And we thought this year we'd bring it out into its own series. Part one, we look through the quarterbacks, probably day 3 type quarterbacks, maybe some late day 2 quarterbacks, but now we are getting into our top 7. And so we're going to save the top 3, but we're going to do number 4, 5, 6, and 7 in this show. Adam, how you doing?
I'm doing good, man. We're going to start with 7, and this is the day that I get myself in deep trouble with all of the YouTube draft people and the Twitterista and all that. Got some differing opinions than some people on these guys, but one of the things before we kind of get through our 7 through 4 here and all the way through the top as we go into our next episode is that one of the cool things about this draft is I think every one of these guys has a legit chance to be a real starter in the NFL. So now it's a kind of measure of how much risk do you like with each guy? How much certainty you get from each guy? What style of play do you like from each guy? And that sort of thing. So that's where we're going to go through here. If you're interested in the way that I kind of go through quarterbacks and break things down, we described it in the opening episode last week. You can go and look that up. But basically, a couple things to keep in mind today is I definitely weight having a higher ceiling a little bit more than a higher floor, a little bit more than a higher ceiling. I think that's important because you really need to succeed with one of these guys in 2 years. Because let's remember, as we're drafting these guys in our little pretend world here, that what we're doing is we're staking our job on the next 2 years that this guy is going to come through. Because if it doesn't, we're Gonskis.
Right. And so when you say a higher floor is important to you, that means that you want a quarterback who is going to be starting for your team in 2 years. So even though Mac Jones was a starter for a couple of years in New England, it obviously didn't work out. He got traded. New England looks bad, and then would be seen as a failure. So in terms of how you would rank guys, you might see him as a floor, but probably not a real high ceiling for a guy like Mac Jones.
Right. And that was my whole problem with Mac Jones is I didn't even think his floor was all that high just because lack of arm strength, no mobility, was just totally into anticipation and accuracy, which are great. Those are traits I want in a quarterback. But in NFL today, you just can't survive that way. You can't just Pennington your way through the NFL anymore. It's not how it works. You got to have a few more traits.
And in terms of quarterbacks we're going to be talking about today, are there maybe the one that we start with is the floor, just because I threw out Mac Jones already,
Sure.
is the floor for this first quarterback going to be higher than the floor for a guy like Mac Jones?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, but his ceiling is so much higher.
Sure.
So much higher than Mac Jones. So to kind of lead into it, and he's actually a great person to start with because of what you just said with Mac. My number 7 quarterback is Michael Penix Jr., the hole shot king. Man, this dude, those cover 2 holes, and he even fits it into some cover 3 hole shots on the outside that are absolutely ridiculous. And he's got the arm strength for days. Good in the pocket. There's some things there that we'll talk about his play in the pocket that I think he needs to address and he can address. Plenty accurate, all the arm strength all day. Some of the problems that I had with his U-tape that we talked about, there are the YouTube
Which
tape.
is U-tape is a combination of YouTube tape.
Yeah. And is that they were constantly working outside the numbers. Like there really wasn't a lot of stuff over the middle. I mean, it was there occasionally, and sometimes he could rip those slants and crossers and things like that. But it was almost all, a dump down or hunting one-on-ones on the outside. And, that's fine. And it got him through college and they had a fantastic offense. I wasn't a fan of the offensive scheme as a whole. And there's going to be some things that he's going to have to adapt to in the NFL in terms of being a complete quarterback. There's a lot to like. His ball placement overall is really good. Like, when he's on, and he rips it right in there. I like where he puts his receivers in position to still be able to continue after the catch. Couple things that are tough. He's not mobile. I mean, he's mobile, but
Mobile-ish, yeah.
he's not mobile. He's maybe like Joe Burrow mobile. Like, can move around a little bit, but it's on the bottom tier. And this is my biggest concern with Michael Penix is he's basically a one-dimensional quarterback because you take the running game out of the mix. I understand he ran 4.6 or whatever it was at the combine. He didn't run that on the field. He just didn't.
He's
And
more of a pocket style quarterback, whereas a lot of times coming out of college, and it's one of the reasons some of these guys survive. Kind of survives them through the first couple of years is they have that athleticism to get out of some nasty spots and make some plays. Whereas if you're a pocket guy learning a system, maybe there isn't as much time for you to keep the job.
absolutely. And you're going to make it a little tougher on your offensive line because if they don't hold up, then you're in trouble. And that's kind of the thing when I'm looking at these quarterbacks. Does he need a specific situation to look good pretty early? And like, if he ended up with the Vikings, like that'd be a team where I'd be like, oh, okay. Like I could see that. Or even the Seahawks, right? The offensive line needs some more work for Seattle, but a team that has a lot of pieces kind of already in place and they're looking to plug the quarterback in rather than the quarterback to come in and be the savior. I think he needs something a little like that. For me, the floor would be like Broncos Joe Flacco. Like if you can remember that version. Big arm, can't move a lick, and just doesn't really inspire, and the offense doesn't really go anywhere. For me, the ceiling is Carson Palmer. Like a guy who can really get it done from the pocket and be awesome for stretches in his career. That's kind of the way I see him.
If that moniker of whole shot king can translate from college to the NFL, and I think it can,
Yeah.
then that's what gets him to that upside because man, his ball placement within zones and attacking defenses is definitely when I look at even the top 7 guys, he might be the number 1 guy in terms of being able to do that.
Oh, for sure. I think he has the strongest arm. That's for sure. One thing that does bother me a little bit from watching him is he goes through these bouts of inaccuracy, and you're like, where did that come from? Where, like, for example, in the national championship game, like,
Yeah.
sure, the defense confused him a little bit. It's closest to the NFL defense he's going to see, but it wasn't like he was lost out there. The problem is that occasionally when he finally did get that shot, he's overthrown guys. He's just missed some dudes wildly. And I kind of watch these quarterbacks going through and going, if I'm watching this guy and he's my quarterback on game day and he's playing like this, what am I yelling at the TV? Because that's our expectation is we want them to come in and be great. And you watch him airmail a couple guys at a big high pressure moment and you're like, dang, like I'd be livid at the TV if
well, with that said, I would think that one of the things you would be a little bit livid at is he passes up some of those short throws then to attack downfield.
Yeah, he's going to have to learn to be a little more patient. So he's the whole shot king, right? Which is great when you're playing the 2 high safety stuff and you can find that little, the honey hole there. That's awesome. But those windows are going to tighten up. And the whole reason they're playing 2 high safeties is they're trying to take away all that deep stuff. He's going to have to learn some patience in the pocket and be able to just take what the defense giving him a little bit. Still hunt for his shots, don't get me wrong, but he's going to need that patience. And then the other thing is he obviously had great wide receiver play, and that's nice. I don't think he was dependent on it by any stretch of the imagination, but he's going to look a lot better in the league if he comes in and has a couple good receivers right out of the gate.
And that's one of the things that you have to watch for, especially because I think we've talked about it with some of the quarterbacks in the part 1, is that you look for to see if they have one of those receivers that's just constantly bailing them out. And with Roma Dunze, obviously, going to be one of the top wide receivers taken in the draft. He would fit into that category, but yet, like you said, probably not dependent on him as much as maybe some of the other quarterbacks that we talked about already.
Totally. And look, we talked a little bit about the accuracy issues from time to time. And I think a lot of that comes from he tends to start fading backwards when he's starting to get a little flustered. And when he's doing that, it's kind of over. And he can get flush out of the pocket and make some throws, especially going to his left. Going to his right is basically a disaster. There's a couple completions there throughout the last 2 years, but it doesn't look good at all. And it kind of feeds into the lack of mobility and being creative and being able to create secondary plays.
I got to be honest, when we started this out and you named the 4 quarterbacks to me, I thought we'd be starting with Jordan Travis.
Yeah. Well, Jordan Travis is interesting. That is my number 6. You
Okay.
nailed it there. I was going to say, I think kind of where he ends up is like an Eli type quarterback. I think that's kind of where Michael Penix ends up with his career. So worth taking.
Yeah, for sure. And definitely a first round talent. So well, that's right. You've talked about this. You don't really care where they go in the draft, but if you're talking Eli Manning talent, I feel like that's worth taking in the first round.
Sure. Most drafts, he would be the second or third quarterback you're talking about, probably, if not the first, depending on the draft, right? So he's a good talent, and I can understand why all the folks out there in Seattle love him with his time at the Huskies, and I'm rooting for him to do big things as well.
He was fun to watch, but Jordan Travis also fun to watch, and it's a shame we didn't get to see him in the playoffs after leading his team to an undefeated season before they got left out of the top bowl games. Because Jordan Travis, when you were talking about a guy who running to his left, running to his right, Travis was a guy to me that I thought could make all the throws on the run.
Holy smokes. So I almost missed Jordan Travis, like just kind of looking through different lists and stuff. And for whatever reason, I just never ended up getting to him. And he was literally the last guy that I looked at. And I was like, holy crap, this really shakes things up in terms of these quarterback rankings for me, because man, this guy, he's got all the talent. His huge arm. You say he can make all the throws, he can make all the throws. He absolutely can, including some daredevil stuff, man. Like just some really tight window stuff and good moving to his left and his right. You bet.
Which got him into some trouble making some of those daredevil throws.
Right. And that's one of the reasons he's down number 6 for me, is that there are some times where he just has such supreme confidence in his arm and what he can do that he is absolutely making piss poor decisions. Like, it happens. There's some really boneheaded throws on the tape at times, right? And that's something that you can work through for sure. He's got a little bit of the chucker gene in him, not a bunch, but a little. He does play quarterback well, like not a true chucker. And I like that a lot about him. He's really good at navigating a messy pocket, right? Like he doesn't bail backwards a bunch and start moving around. Like he'll work himself up the pocket and find the right guy. Just a guy that I think has all the tools. And honestly, he reminds me a lot of a different Jordan, and it's Jordan Love. He looks so much like Jordan Love to me. Like same sort of mobility, same sort of arm talent, and same sort of seasoning needed before you can turn him loose. And I think the only reason we're not talking about him, as a community, is that he did break his leg in this last season. Now, it's a broken leg. It's not like he tore both Achilles or something. I feel like it's something he can come back from more times than not. I would be extremely interested. If the Hawks drafted Jordan Travis at 16, I'd do cartwheels.
Wow, at 16 even.
Sure. He's a first-round talent. Like, it's just that. And again, I don't care exactly where they get drafted. If you think the guy can play, then draft him. I don't care if it's 1 or 300.
And I only make that a question because he's a guy that I feel like in draft circles is talked about as maybe second or third round pick. And I feel like the Seahawks would take some heat for overdrafting at number 16. But like you said, for the type of quarterback that he could become, and sitting behind Geno for a year, and maybe they do something with Sam Howell to pick up extra picks, I could see why you wouldn't be mad at it. But I just feel like there would be the questions around if they left too much draft stock on the table to be able to take him later.
Sure. You got a guy that can sit behind Geno and get Sam Howell out the door, so we don't have to deal with that. And you've got a guy for the next, 5, 6 years potentially, and a guy that has all the types of tools that you need in the NFL to succeed. One of the things that I did get a little bothered by is he gets up on his toes and he's hopping around in the pocket a lot.
Oh,
And it's like, just get your cleats in the dirt, man. And this is all little stuff. It's just like Jordan Love in the way that he was raw coming out. And I really like Jordan Love coming out as well. So I, his floor, I mean, I think he's going to be a low level starter at the minimum.
yeah.
At the minimum, and he has potential to be a high level starter. And I really, the comp to me is just Jordan Love. I think he can be that sort of player pretty early.
Yeah, it's a
He
shame
needs a
because
year.
one of the things that you like to look at is what do they look like in big moments. And so unfortunately we missed out on some of those big bowl game moments with him because of the injury. You don't look at some of the personality stuff. I think in terms of character, it kind of boosts him up too.
I tell you what, I don't get much into that stuff, but I did happen to watch some interviews, including the bootleg interview with EJ and Brett, and just came away from that being like, that's a big boy. Like that's he's a young man, right? Instead of just, a kid coming out. And man, I'm just super impressed with the play. Because I think I had a notion in the back of my mind that he was going to be just super raw, almost more like Anthony Richardson, where you're like, oh, I can see some stuff here, but boy, howdy, he's got to learn a lot about playing quarterback yet. And it was just a pleasant surprise.
Well, it may not be a pleasant surprise to see that you have JJ McCarthy and Caleb Williams as your next two quarterbacks when we still have 3 to go
Oh,
on the next episode. Because, gosh, as we're doing this, Adam, I try and rank how I think quarterbacks would be in my mind too. And I feel like both these guys might be in my top 3. And here they are at number 4 and 5.
yeah. So, and it's difficult for me to choose too. And again, this gets a lot to floors and ceilings, and specifically floors. So, what I ended up doing here, I went JJ McCarthy at 5.
Okay.
And look, with JJ, he's the only dude in this draft class that ran anything that resembled an NFL offense
Right.
and did it well, and showed that, like, with limited opportunities throwing the football, he could still be a game changer in big moments and do that with his legs or his arm. There's a bunch of tight window throws on the tape. He's more mobile than you think. He's not going to be a burner and that sort of thing, but he will be able to move the chains for you when you desperately need it, get out of trouble a little bit. Tough as nails. He's got really nice touch. The arm strength is good, like from intermediate depths down to short. On the deep ball, it tends to die a little bit. I think he'd need to work on that a little bit as he gets into the league, but good out of play action. And he's good when the pocket gets messy around him. And I just thought that he looked like the most NFL ready tomorrow quarterback. Like, you draft him, and on almost any team with almost any coach, I think he could go in and operate an NFL style offense.
Yeah, and I think all those things are fair. I think maybe I'm putting more emphasis than when I think of where he should be on being able, like, to deliver in the big moments, like winning a
Yes.
national championship, and then not putting as much emphasis on some of those deep throws just because he has all that command over the intermediate stuff, and he can, zip it right in.
100%. And it's high level stuff. I think that he has gotten a bad rap of just being a game manager. I don't think he's that. I think he's going to be better than that in the NFL. I think his floor is 49ers, Alex Smith,
Okay.
where, he just gets with the wrong coach. It's tough on him. Maybe his confidence gets, dinged a little bit and struggles for a bit. But I think his ceiling could be Kansas City Chiefs, Alex Smith, which is a hell of a quarterback, an above average quarterback at that point. But I don't think he's got superstar potential. I don't think that's in him. I think
Really?
he's most likely going to be the guy we look at as the Dalton line in the league for the next 5, 6, 7 years.
He's so young. It just feels like he has more potential ahead of him than some of those other guys. So that might be what I'm looking at too, is that youth component that I know you don't care about too much, but I think that when we try and dissect JJ McCarthy, it's kind of, you take away too, at Michigan, he wasn't asked really to do a lot of, he wasn't really asked to carry the team. And so that's where, especially with a guy who we're going to talk about coming up with, Caleb Williams, that was a guy who was asked to carry the team. And so it's really easy to, and maybe that's how you ended up ranking one or the other over why you have Caleb ranked ahead of JJ. But yeah, it makes it tough then, especially with these two in particular, to try and put one ahead of the other.
Yeah, and we'll get to Caleb in a second and why this is tough for me. And I differ than pretty much everybody who says he's slam dunk generational talent. But with JJ specifically, I don't see anything in his college tape that I go, ooh, that's Allen, that's Herbert, that's, Mahomes, that's Burrow. Like, when I watched Burrow come out, it was so effortless for him, being on time and on target and just knowing exactly where to go with the ball with all the arm you need. Like, just, I don't see anything in JJ's tape where I'm like, ooh, there's some superstar talent there. I see, like, damn, he could be real damn good and, be Kansas City Chief Alex Smith, be Geno Smith from this last couple years, be like, yeah, good enough to win a Super Bowl for sure if you got a good team around him, but probably not the guy that you're going to be thinking is a top 5 guy at any point in his career.
You said his ceiling would be Alex Smith, Kansas City Chiefs. It might even be like Joe Flacco ceiling though, when he was leading the Ravens. And maybe you like Flacco less than Alex Smith at Kansas City
by a lot.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
You're never big on Flacco.
No, he's got concrete boots. Like, he can't move. He had one great playoff run. Congratulations.
And but I think that's where his ceiling is higher for me. I can't help but see him as a guy who can, is kind of that calm, a lot like, you mentioned Joe Burrow, kind of that dude who is cool in big moments. And he gives off that vibe to me.
Oh, for sure. I think we're saying the same thing,
Okay.
just differently. That I think that he has the potential to come in and be the type of starter that if you build a nice team around him, he can be way more than a Trent Dilfer winning a Super Bowl, right? Like, a guy that you go, wow, without JJ McCarthy during that playoff run, they're not winning the chip, but also they had a nice team around him. He steadied the ship. He did all the right things. He made the right play in the big moment. I think he can absolutely be that guy.
And maybe I'm valuing upside a lot more than you because, again, like I said, I'd have both these guys in my top 3. And when I look at the upside of Caleb Williams too, man, when you talk about fun tape to watch and things that jump off the screen at you, you don't really see it with JJ, but you see it with Caleb.
So, yeah, number 4, Caleb Williams. He is exciting. Oh, my goodness, is he exciting. It is fun watching Caleb Williams tape. There's no doubt about it. And I can understand being intoxicated with his style of play. I totally get it. The thing about it to me is I went back obviously I started in 23 and everybody's like, we can't judge everything off of that because the team around him stunk. Well,
sure.
Okay, fine. So went back, watched a lot of 22 and in almost every game. And you see a lot of the same things pop up in 22 as he did in 23. Just Jordan Addison was able to get open a little bit more and the offensive line was a little bit better. But there's some things with Caleb that bother me. I don't think he's that generational talent. Like, I remember watching Andrew Luck come out and you watch that, I watched that and was like, yep, that's a generational talent. I don't care where he goes. Right. He's going to be great wherever he goes. He can do everything. He's great in the pocket. He's great outside of the pocket. He's big. He's tough. He's fast. All of it. Great arm. I felt the same way about Burrow when he came out. I was like, that is the number 1 pick in the draft. There's no doubt to me that that's a quarterback. Like, he's going to be great. I don't care where he goes. And so I'm not saying that I don't have him number one just to be contrary, right? Like last year, obviously, I wasn't into Bryce Young. I wasn't saying that just to be contrary. Like there are times when the consensus is absolutely right.
Yeah.
But I think in this case, Brandon, the NFL is a pendulum, right? And for a long time, the running quarterbacks were saw as guys that you couldn't win with.
Sure.
And then, things have changed in the last 10 years dramatically. And now with the rise of Patrick Mahomes, I think everybody is hell-bent on having that style of quarterback. And so the pendulum has swung too far the other way to playmaker in without taking enough consideration for what a guy does in the pocket. Because honestly, that's the part of Caleb Williams' game that absolutely terrifies me. And I've listened to so many guys say, well, he's great in the pocket. And boy, maybe we're listening to different music because he holds the ball forever. And you can tell me it's because they're not open or whatever. Fine. And then when he scrambles, he doesn't scramble like Patrick Mahomes. He scrambles like Russell Wilson. His game is so much more Russell Wilson than it is Patrick Mahomes. I don't get the Mahomes comparison at all.
He is very much like Russell Wilson in the way that he gets out of the pocket, and like him in the same way that he tends to bail from the pocket a little bit too early because he wants to get outside the pocket, look downfield, and try and make plays that way. So that would be kind of my knock on him. The other thing, if people say that he's really good from the pocket, almost every USC game I watched, it was he takes the snap and then the pocket is immediately penetrated by a defender, and he's having to bounce outside the pocket anyway. So that was part of my thinking too, is that, well, he just doesn't have he's so early to escape the pocket because he's just expecting the pocket to break down quickly.
Oh, 100%. And that's a valid point, especially when it comes to the 23 stuff, right? But if you go back to 22, like he did have a pocket more often. I mean, it still wasn't amazing, and he still had to bail sometimes and all that, and that's fine. Go make plays, and that's the exciting part about Caleb Williams. I like that part. But when he's sitting there standing in the pocket, I don't think he sees the field particularly well. And the weirdest thing that popped off for me, Brandon, is that he can't hit guys that are running across his face horizontally. Like if the only time he hits dudes that are running horizontally is when he is in phase with them and he's rolling with them. Otherwise, it's bad. It's really, really poor. And then on top of that, they didn't hardly run any of that stuff. And I think the reason is that he can't throw crossers and things of that nature very well at all. Even the slants that he hits and stuff, they're more bending vertically. He's great when guys are running straight away from him, or more often than not in the pocket, his completions were hitches, comebacks, stop routes, like just guys who run to a point, turn around, and then are either coming back to him or he knows right where to go with the ball. Can he hit guys going down the field, down the sidelines? Absolutely. I'm not saying he can't do that. But again, that's a vertical route running away from him.
Mm-hmm.
I've never watched anybody and felt that so starkly.
See, and that's a shame for not seeing him at the combine, and maybe one of the reasons why he didn't want to perform at the combine, because then it gives you the opportunity, because they run a lot of those types of NFL style routes that you want to see, and then you can match them up to the other quarterbacks that are also throwing and see which ones are really good at it and which ones aren't. So yeah, that's a bummer, but that could be a key in terms of a major key in terms of the kind of success, because we lived it as Seahawks fans with Russell Wilson and the types of throws that Pete Carroll obviously able to manage around him. And so Caleb could be one of those quarterbacks where it is very system dependent if they have a coach willing to build that kind of system around what he does best. Because one of the things he does really well in college is making other college players look silly. And if you can make other college dudes look silly, then there's a good chance that you're going to be able to succeed at the pro level.
Right. And, there's a number of guys who you speak about systems who have had to do what Caleb did, which is survive Cliff Kingsbury. Right. And you think about the guys who have had to do it, and they're all similar players, had to run around, make stuff happen, things like that. Johnny Manziel, Kyler Murray, and Patrick Mahomes. And one of the things that I did is I watched Caleb at USC, and then I watched Texas Tech Patrick Mahomes. And it's very different. Like, Pat played so much more from the pocket and was slicing and dicing from there. Did he run around and do chucker things sometimes? Yeah. Yeah, he did. But not to the level that Caleb did. And, Kyler Murray, same thing when he got to the NFL and was stuck with Kingsbury, right? A lot of running around. But what Kyler does is he's extremely fast in terms of getting downfield. Caleb's always running backwards. He's always running backwards. And that gets hard to, survive that way. Honestly, in some ways, Manziel's college stuff looked a lot closer to Caleb than any of the other guys. No, I'm not saying he's going to be Johnny Manziel. I'm not saying that. I am not saying that. So
are you saying he's going to be Johnny Manziel?
I'm just saying these are quarterbacks that had to survive Cliff Kingsbury. So you can look at their tape from college and then compare it to Caleb's tape at USC. And I think that helps you try to figure out the comps here, because to me, Caleb is such a wild young buck that one of the questions I always ask is, do you need a specific situation or coach? He needs a specific situation or coach. He needs Andy Reid. I've only seen two guys who are chuckers, and don't get it twisted. Caleb Williams is a freaking chucker. He's chucking it everywhere. He don't care. He don't care. Is Brett Favre and Pat Mahomes. Those are the only two chuckers I've seen figure it out. Maybe Elway. Elway was a little bit better than a chucker, but just those two guys. And they had one thing in common, and it was Andy Reid. Caleb Williams needs Andy Reid so freaking bad, it's not even funny. And
he's going to get Shane Waldron.
And that's where it's at for me, man. Like, I am terrified for the Bears in terms of, you're telling me Eberflus and Waldron are going to be the two guys that can get, Caleb Williams to look a lot better and play a little more under control and in the pocket and on time and in rhythm. I don't think that those guys are that dude in terms of coaching. And then, the excuses for Caleb last year was, well, the offensive line is bad. The talent's not good around him. What kind of team is he going to go to with the number 1 draft pick?
Yeah.
I mean, Justin Fields was running for his life for 3 years.
Yeah.
Like, suddenly the offensive line is going to be better next year, and they got an old Keenan Allen. Like, great. I don't think that that's an incredible situation for him to land. I think his floor could be as bad as it gets. I mean, Zach Wilson type floor. Like, no, not Manziel. He's not a head case like Manziel, right?
That's true.
But his ceiling can absolutely be peak Russ. Yeah, peak Russ.
Yeah.
Just ridiculous. You're thinking of him as a top 2-3 guy in the league pretty easily. Like, his ceiling is that. I don't want to take that away from him. And I don't think what I'm trying to say, it does that. But if I play the what's more likely game, I think it's most likely he ends up like Kyler Murray. Like, some spurts of goodness and just some frustrating inconsistency that he just can't get around.
Because, but without that kind of coaching, not the championship caliber quarterback that you're trying to go for when you're looking at all of his tools and trying to match him up to a guy like Patrick Mahomes.
Exactly. He's not surefire. Like, watching Trevor Lawrence, I was like, that's an NFL quarterback. That's number 1 pick. You bet your ass. I agree with everybody on that one. Now, has he lived completely up to that yet? No, he hasn't. But Burrow was that way for me.
He's also had some questionable coaches down there in Jacksonville too.
Yeah, it's been tough, but he hasn't been a dumpster fire either, right? Like, he's been a legit NFL starter since he came into the league. And that's what you're looking for at the number 1 pick. I think Caleb is going to have a hard time surviving down in, down out, playing that style of football on the regular. He made college guys look silly at times. You bet you. Yeah, he did. But these guys, the worst player on an NFL roster is the best dude on Iowa right now.
Yeah.
It doesn't translate.
No, it makes it real tough then to try and find that ceiling floor. He does of all these guys, I do feel like he has the widest variance, and so
Yes,
the
and that's
reason
why
why
he's number 4
and
for
that's why
me.
he's number 4 for you. But
Yeah,
I leaning more toward the upside. It has me in a little bit higher category for me. It would put him in the top 3 for me. He might not be my number 1, but he's awfully close. We've got 3 guys to talk about coming up in part 3 that and if you can, if you're following along at home, you've probably narrowed it down. The fact that we haven't talked about Bo Nix yet. We
mhm.
haven't talked about Drake May, and we haven't talked about
Jaden Daniels.
Jalen Daniels. Yeah, Jaden
Yeah,
Daniels.
Jaden Daniels. So, yeah, again, another grouping of guys that have a lot of talent, much like all of these 4 that we just talked through. I'm not saying, like, for example, that Caleb's definitely going to be a bust. Like, in fact, I'm saying it's more likely that he ends up, having
Kyler's not a
some,
bust.
not a
Kyler's
bust.
been a good quarterback, but
He's been streaky. Yeah,
yeah.
he's been okay.
But
But
again, a guy who, because of the play style, ends up getting injured more often, and then not
yeah,
having that availability to lead the team, then you're relying on dudes like Colt McCoy to come in and carry you over 6-7 game stretches, and that ends up harming your team.
it does. It does. So it's gonna be interesting. I can feel the comments rolling in already before we've even posted this. Be mad at me if you want. It's fine. It's just, this is in a little bit about this with Caleb. The last thing is, this is just gut. It's a little bit gut. Like when I watch his stuff, it's like, oh, that was nice. Oh, that's really scary. And
Yeah,
there's just too much of that for me.
I don't blame you with that part of it, because yeah, there were a lot of times where I said the same thing myself, where you don't know if that style of play will translate consistently, and it's those question marks that when they get in your head, it's hard for them to go. But when you see some of those upside plays, it's like, man, oh man, that those are the kinds of things that remind me of Russell Wilson, of Patrick Mahomes, and Super Bowl winning quarterbacks. And if you could do those things, can you tighten up some of the other things through coaching? Some coaches might be able to do it. Some coaches, maybe not so much.
Maybe not so much. And that's where I find these final 3 quarterbacks, they have all the upside and a higher floor.
Okay.
Like I feel like there's a less chance of failure.
Well, we will get to those next week. Be sure and like this video out on YouTube. Subscribe at youtube.com/Seahawkers podcast. If you want to help support the show, you can go to getintheflock.com, and $5 a month and above gets you into our Discord group where we talk football. You can at Adam there, yell at him directly, because maybe you won't see it on YouTube, but if you pay your $5, it's going to be seen by a lot more people.
Oh, for sure. And yeah, if you feel like what you have to say is that important, and look, at this point, we're all kind of throwing darts. And if you're the type of person that really likes taking big risks, then I can totally understand why you differ from me in probably my entire list. But again, looking at it as we're betting our jobs over the next 2 years on this guy being a success.
Well, I'm looking forward to that top 3. We're going to get into it next week, Adam. And I think with that,
There's only one thing left to say.
go Hawks.
Go Hawks.